The Nexus Bar sat on the edge of Station Omega-7, a notorious watering hole where species from across the galaxy came to drink, deal, and occasionally die. The establishment's reputation was built on two things: the strongest Jovian whiskey, the side of the Andromeda Gate, and Krax, the Thorsian bouncer whose forearms and crystalline exoskeleton had never met a problem. He couldn't handle Dot until tonight. Alice Chen sat at the far end of the bar, nursing her second glass of something that glowed faintly purple. Her dark hair was tied back in a practical ponytail, and her jumpsuit bore the insignia of an independent cargo hauler. She'd been traveling the outer colonies for 3 years now, and she'd learned to keep her head down and her business to herself. Quinn Martinez slid onto the stool beside her, his easy grin at odds with the tension crackling through the bar. "You really shouldn't have won that hand, Alice," he said quietly, his brown eyes scanning the crowd of increasingly agitated Vulcan traders across the room. "I won it fair," Alice replied, her voice steady. "Not my fault they can't bluff worth a damn." The Vulcan were a proud species, 7 feet tall with scaled green skin and a cultural obsession with honor. Losing their cargo manifest codes to a human in a card game wasn't just embarrassing. It was humiliating. Alice had known the risks when she sat down at their table, but the codes were worth a fortune, and she'd played the game perfectly. "Fair doesn't matter when they've got friends," Quinn muttered, jerking his head toward the entrance where 3 more Vulcan had just arrived, their translator collars humming with aggressive intent. The lead Vulcan, a scarred veteran named Vex, stood from his table with deliberate slowness. The bar went quiet. Even the Silurian jazz band in the corner stopped mid-note. "Human," Vex growled, his voice like gravel in a cement mixer. "You will return what you stole, or we will take it from your corpse." Alice turned on her stool, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I didn't steal anything. You bet it, I won it." "That's how cards work." Vex's nostril slits flared. He took a step forward. That's when Krax moved. The Thorsian bouncer was a mountain of muscle and armor, standing nearly 8 feet tall. His forearms flexed as he stepped between Alice and the approaching Vulcan. "No fights," Krax rumbled in galactic standard. "You know rules. Take it outside or leave." Vex's eyes never left Alice. "Move aside, bouncer. This is Vulcan business. This is my bar," Krax countered. "My rules." For a moment, it seemed like the tension might diffuse. Then one of Vex's companions, younger, stupider, full of fire, made his move. He lunged past Krax, reaching for Alice with clawed hands extended. Quinn was faster. He intercepted the Vulcan mid-lunge, his shoulder catching the alien in the midsection. They crashed into a table, scattering drinks and patrons. The bar erupted into chaos. Krax's attention snapped to the fight, and in that split second of distraction, Vex moved. His massive hand shot out and grabbed Alice by the front of her jumpsuit, lifting her clean off her stool. "You will learn respect, human," Vex snarled, pulling her close to his fanged face. What happened next would become legend on Omega-7. Alice's hand moved with practiced precision. She'd spent 2 years mining on high-gravity worlds where the pull was 3 times Earth normal. She'd loaded cargo containers that would crush most species. She'd survived hull breaches, radiation storms, and a Krillian plague that killed everything it touched. Humans, the galaxy was learning, were deceptively fragile looking. Her fist connected with Vex's throat in a strike that would have been a slap from most species. But human bone density, human muscle evolved from climbing trees and throwing spears. Human adrenaline that could let mothers lift vehicles off their children, all of it channeled into that single blow. Vex's eyes bulged, his grip released. He staggered backward, gasping through his crushed trachea. Alice dropped to her feet, already moving. Vex swung wildly with his right arm. She ducked under it, stepped inside his guard, and drove her elbow into his floating rib equivalent. The crack was audible even over the bar fight raging around them. Krax, who had just thrown de Vulcan through a table, turned back to see the impossible. A human, barely 5.5 feet tall, putting down Vex the unbreakable. The bouncer made his mistake then. He assumed the human needed controlling. He assumed she was the problem. His upper right hand clamped down on Alice's shoulder like a vise of living crystal. Alice's head snapped around, her eyes meeting Krax's. There was no fear there, no hesitation, just cold calculation. "Bad move," she said, before Krax could process the warning. Alice's hand found the pressure point where his crystalline armor segmented at the wrist. Humans had been studying alien anatomy since first contact, and Alice had made it her business to learn. She pressed hard with her thumb, finding the nerve cluster that even Thorsian armor couldn't fully protect. Krax's hand spasmed open. Pain, a sensation his species rarely experienced, shot up his arm. Alice spun, using his moment of confusion to grab his lower left arm at the elbow joint. She dropped her weight, pulling him off balance with leverage that shouldn't have worked on someone twice her mass. But she'd learned long ago that mass didn't matter as much as momentum and angle. Krax stumbled, and then Quinn was there, having dispatched his own opponents. He swept Krax's legs, literally swept them, using a table leg as an improvised staff. The mighty Thorsian bouncer crashed to the floor with a sound like a chandelier falling. The bar went silent again. Alice stood over Krax, breathing hard but controlled. "I won fair," she said to the room at large. "I fought fair, and I'm walking out of here with what's mine." She reached down and offered Krax her hand. The bouncer stared at it for a long moment, his four eyes blinking in sequence. Then, slowly, he reached up and took it. She couldn't possibly lift him, of course, but the gesture, the respect, was what mattered. Krax pulled himself up, rubbing his wrist. "You are very strong. For human, strong enough," Alice replied. Quinn appeared at her side, equally winded, sporting a cut over his eye that was already swelling. "We should probably go." "Agreed," Alice said. They made it 3 steps toward the door before Krax's voice stopped them. "Human, Alice." The bouncer's voice carried across the silent bar. "You come back to Nexus Bar anytime. First drink free. Anyone touches you." His 4 fists clenched simultaneously. "They deal with Krax." Alice allowed herself a small smile. "Appreciated." As they stepped out into the neon-lit corridor of Omega-7, Quinn let out a long breath. "You know, one day your luck is going to run out." Alice patted the data chip in her pocket, the cargo codes worth more than a year's honest work. Today's not that day. Behind them, the Nexus Bar slowly came back to life, and Krax the Unbreakable stood at his post, looking at his upper right hand with new respect for the species that had once seemed so weak, so breakable. He'd grabbed a human, he'd regretted it, and he'd learned a lesson the galaxy was slowly learning. Humanity didn't survive by being the strongest, the fastest, or the toughest. They survived by being the most stubborn, the most adaptable, and the most dangerous when cornered. The Nexus Bar had a new rule after that night, posted right beside the no fighting sign: "Don't underestimate the humans." The end.